So you're telling me through 6 games, 6 different defense, 6 different coaches, 6 different defensive coordinators, everybody's trying to take the football away from you outside the numbers? Nobody has said, you know what, Jalen Hurts is not that accurate. Let's force him to throw the football in the middle of the field. Are you kidding me?
All right, do we or don't we have our buddy John McMullen? We don't have his fancy face. There it is. Hello, J-Mac. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you guys? How was Seth?
He was.
I thought he was
tremendous.
outstanding.
1% better every question, John.
1%. That's all we can do. That's all we. Well, I guess if you're 2-4, you might want to get 2% better, but who knows?
No, we know you're an actual 1%er, so that's a given that you can handle it. All right. First question for me is, and I pretty much know the answer, but I need you to confirm. The Eagles starting tight end Dallas Goedert has not cleared the COVID protocol yet, correct?
Correct. I think today will be 10 days, so I think today is going to be a big day, but I have to check on that exactly. Yeah, I mean, we talked about if you have symptoms, and by the nature of the fact that before Dallas was on the COVID list, he had missed a practice with what was described as an illness. So you don't have to be the greatest sleuth in the world to know he was having some kind of symptoms. So that pointed more toward 10 days than the quick 2 tests that sometimes you see people get cleared. So I think today is the 10th day, and I can't check on my phone, but this will be a key day. And if it's not today, it's Vegas, but you have to wait and see, obviously.
John, I've been waiting a couple of days to ask you this. So I was in Baltimore this weekend covering the Ravens game. Nick Sirianni came up, and yeah, and overwhelmed was a term I heard 3 or 4 times. You're in the trenches. Does he feel like he's overwhelmed after 6 weeks?
It looks like it at times. I've said, from the start of this, I thought, and Jody and I were talking about this a little bit again yesterday. I thought it was just strange the way they put together this coaching staff, not having that veteran voice to lean on. Just the one thing, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing over the years, Jeff, the one thing every coach says the same. The one thing they all have in common is they say, wow, I didn't know how much more I had to do as a head coach. And most of it doesn't involve football. Most of it's ancillary stuff. And there's always a growing pain aspect to that job. So I knew that was coming. I don't think he put together the staff probably the way he should have. And that's not an indictment for the position coaches or teaching or anything like that. Just not having someone who's done it before and you can go to advice. And you can call Frank Reich and you can text Frank Reich and you can bring in Mike McCoy for a couple of days in training camp and talk and text to him. But it's not the same as having somebody there every day. And they haven't had that. And that was one of my biggest concerns. And I think it's manifesting itself at least a little bit. But I knew the growing pains were coming. It happens with every first year head coach, every rookie head coach. And it's a little bit even harder. If you take a look at a Matt Rule, for instance, a couple of weeks ago in Carolina in year 2, you go back to his rookie year, we had Colin Thompson on the show, and he was like, well, he was a head coach at Temple and Baylor, so at least he did it at that level and kind of knew the enormity of the job. Nick's doing it, first time at the NFL level. That's difficult.
Okay, Max, speaking of that staff, a couple of weeks ago, Jonathan Gannon decided, let me further explain a statement I had previously made. He had said in a previous engagement, we don't really have a system. And he explained it after the fact. Well, what I meant by that was we don't want to be beholden to a system. We want to stay fluid. We want to be flexible. We don't want to try and put square pegs in round holes. And I even understood it when he said we don't have a system, I knew what he meant, but not everybody did. So I felt the need to explain it and lay it out a little bit better. Is he going to have to explain how Ryan Kerrigan is a productive player? Because he tried to do it yesterday, and for me, he failed miserably. Is this going to be another revisit situation for the Eagles defensive coordinator?
I don't think it's going to be a revisit situation. I think it's going to be one of those situations where people focus on that quote, and I think they already have, and they run with it.
Yeah, you can count me in that group. I was befuddled by what he said yesterday.
Yeah, and see, that's the mistake, and that's the mistake young coaches make. You got to be, and I'm 100 years old, and I make this mistake constantly. Jody calls me out on this. You got to be very, very precise in what you're trying to say, because Jonathan Cannon can be looking at me, or Zach Berman, or Jimmy Kempsey, and we know what the hell he's talking about. I mean, we do. I'm sorry if people take that. We know what he's trying to say. The people with the camera, they don't know what he's trying to say, and all they hear is Ryan Kerrigan's playing well. And he went into a pretty in-depth explanation. And I know from Mike Zimmer's defense, I mean, that's a more disciplined pass rush. That's, guys have gotten upset in the past because they don't get the sack numbers they think they might have gotten because they're not allowed to freelance. Everything's about technique. Everything's about staying in your lane. So I understood what he was trying to say, but the messaging was just awful. And that's where young coaches have to understand they're not just talking to the media people, they're talking to everybody, and everybody's hearing this, and all they're taking out of that is Ryan Kerrigan is playing well with 1 tackle in 6 games, and then you become a bit of a laughing stock, which I don't think is fair. I get what he was trying to say. We're asking Ryan Kerrigan to do different things than what you think of in Washington. He's not a playmaker anymore. He's a role player. And that's what he's doing. And he's successful at his role. But everybody shut that off. As soon as he said he's playing well, that's it. That's the clip. Boom. And you can't just make that declarative statement. You gotta go into the explanation and leave that open-ended and say he's doing what we're asking him to do would be a better answer than, he's productive, which is essentially what Jonathan said.
Not to mention Ryan Kerrigan's 1 tackle was when Chuba ran into him. So I don't even know if I want to count that as a tackle job, but I digress. Ryan Kerrigan, Eric Wilson. Yeah, if the Eagles are selling, do you think they'll be here this entire season?
Well, I don't know why anybody else would want them. I mean, Jody and I have talked about this seller mentality. I mean, you can want to sell all these players, but somebody's got to want them. Now, could you trade Steven Nelson? Yeah, you could trade Steve Nelson. Could you trade Andre Dillard? Yeah. Could you trade Derek Barnett for, because of his salary, you probably only get a 6th, 7th round pick, but you can move him. Can you move Eric Wilson? I
just said cut him. That would have been a better term.
Yeah, they could release him, especially if Davion Taylor seizes control of that job. But he's a veteran linebacker. I think he'll be here. I think Ryan will be here after what JG said. I don't think they're going to cut him, but you never know. Yeah, but I mean, those have not been effective signings, especially, Kerrigan. I don't get that mixed up in Kerrigan. He doesn't play that much. He's a rotational guy. Wilson was supposed to be, and he's already lost that job, was supposed to be the 3-down linebacker. And it has not worked out at all. So that to me is a bigger concern. And the Eagles should have saw that coming. They got snowed by big plays. And I always go back to that quote I got from somebody in Minnesota about Eric Wilson, 20-point scorer on a bad NBA team. Like, he's really athletic. He's going to make an interception when the quarterback makes a mistake. He's good in pass coverage. Maybe the worst run support linebacker who plays significant snaps in the NFL. And he was last year as well. So that should be no surprise to the Eagles. None.
Understood, and I knew you were going there again because you do like that quote, and it is quite fitting. You gave it to us way before the season ever started, I think, as a matter of fact, when he signed, and he has lived up to his reputation, as you correctly pointed out, J-Mac. The Eagles had a long preparation week, at least the coaches did. The players had more downtime because they're collectively bargained to have more downtime. But the Eagles supposedly put in that much more time on the staff, self-scouting, self-evaluating, and the like. Do they come up with the conclusion that maybe running the football would be advantageous? This week, the Raiders aren't a great defensive team against the run. I believe they're 25th in the NFL. Eagles are 28th, but the Raiders aren't great at it either. Is all that extra study time going to get to the fact that let's give Miles Sanders 7 or 8 carries this week?
All I can say is we will see. I do think it's going to be far more interesting on offense than defense or certainly special teams. I mean, Michael Clay spent his extra time on the golf course. Shot pretty well, by the way. But offensively is where you have to really focus and see if there's any changes. And, we got Shane Steichen yesterday, which is not as important as Nick Sirianni today. And he mentioned we got to get the football to Moss, but they've said that in the past. I think it has more to do with the offense and that chicken and the egg situation where we talked about. And, what is the offense? Is this offense just awful? Is Nick Sirianni, to use Jeff's term that he heard in Baltimore, is he overwhelmed? Is he just overmatched, or is he trying to protect the quarterback? I hope, like I said, I think he's trying to protect the quarterback. And then you get the people who don't understand. Well, 87% of Jalen Hurts of the Eagles' offense is Jalen Hurts. How is that protecting him? Well, they're protecting him by not forcing him to make progressions on the field. One read stuff, quick bubble screens, quick slip screens. He handles the football in the running game. He's reading one player. This is all simple stuff. Is it simple because Nick's got nothing else? Or is it simple because he's protecting the quarterback? You better hope for long term it's because he's protecting the quarterback, because the alternative is far worse. That's just a guy who shouldn't be a head coach, the alternative.
John, how can I word this? Do you just think Jalen Hurts had a bad week where he played 2 games in 5 days, or is this going to be a long-term indicator of what he can and can't do in Philadelphia?
Well, I think he had a bad game, and everyone has bad games, even the greats. So you kind of look at the larger sample size, which we are through 6 games. The most concerning part to me is they ignore the middle of the field. They ignore it. And Shane Steichen said again today, well, that's what the opposing defenses are giving us. And that's been an Eagles theme. Nick has said that as well. So you're telling me through 6 games, 6 different defense, 6 different coaches, 6 different defensive coordinators, everybody's trying to take the football away from you outside the numbers. Nobody has said, you know what, Jalen Hurts is not that accurate. Let's force him to throw the football in the middle of the field. Are you kidding me? That's the kind of stuff that bothers me. 6 throws of 208 pass attempts in between the hashes per ESPN. 6 throws of 208. Now you think about, and I brought this up to Jody, Jeff. Now, Tom Brady's an outlier. Tom's different. But you think about him in New England towards the end. He's got the receivers in Tampa now, so it's different. He's got great receivers. He didn't have any receivers. Everything in New England was middle of the field with the tight ends and James White and the running backs and the angle routes. Everything. He might complete 20 passes to the middle of the field in one game. And the Eagles have thrown 6 passes in the middle of the field over 6 games. That has got to change for 2 reasons. One, if you're that afraid of Jalen Hurts throwing the football over the middle of the field, well, then he's not the answer. You already have your answer. And then the second part is you got to evaluate the kid. You got to give him a fair chance. But if you have the answer, if you think you have the answer, well, then, yeah, maybe you start talking about Gardner Minshew. If you're not going to throw the football in an area of the field because of the quarterback, maybe you got to start saying, you know what, we might as well turn the page.
Marcus Hayes will be with us tomorrow. May get exactly what he wants because he suggested this week that it's time for Jalen to take a seat. All right, I want to flat back over to the defense with you, J-Mac. As we talked about Jonathan Gannon earlier, I think a lot of people did, but he felt the need to explain the fact that they don't have a system. We know they have a system, and he just doesn't want to be locked in, that he doesn't want lack flexibility with his system. We got a pretty good grasp on what his system is. How is his system going to work against Darren Waller this week? Who on this Eagle team or what aspect of their system, non-system, is actually going to give them a chance to stop one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the NFL?
I think a lot depends. If you go back to Kansas City, for instance, well, technically they handled Travis Kelce, but it was Tyreek Hill. So, you can take anybody out of the game if you want to bracket them consistently. But the question is, what are you going to do with the other guys? And then if they're successful, you try to, behind the scenes, JG is pretty honest. Make your choices. And if they decide that that's what they want to game plan and they want to take Darren Waller out of the game, they could probably take him out of the game. If they don't, if they want to game plan in a different direction or feel they need to, then it's up to the Rodney McLeods and Anthony Harrises of the world, Eric Wilsons of the world, to handle Darren Waller. And you also add, obviously, Avonte Maddox. Now, in theory, I think Avonte's played pretty well, but that's a mismatch from a size standpoint, obviously, and that's why you have these flex tight ends. That's why NFL teams like them if they can get them, because it's always a mismatch. You're either too fast, too big for the corner, too athletic for the linebacker, and that's why all of them. That's why Kyle Pitts was the 4th pick in the draft. That's why Kelsey's Kelce. And that's why Darren Waller's, was turned in from a wide receiver at Georgia Tech to a king-size flex receiver. That's what people are trying to generate. And yeah, it's a mismatch. So if you want to take him out of the game, you can, but then you have difficulties on the outside.
John, I thought it was pretty telling what Brandon Graham said on the postgame show Thursday night about Jonathan Gannon. It was, look, players are bought into the system. They're bought into him. But deep down, he knows he just doesn't have the personnel. What does Gannon need more than anything else on this defense to be competent going forward?
Linebackers, first and foremost. He's got nothing at linebacker, and he doesn't have confidence, obviously, in his backup corners. And they could use another safety. So basically, I think Rodney has played pretty well since he's come back. But he's also an aging player. I think he's kind of limited. He's not a star player by any stretch of the imagination. Anthony Harris has, got some good ball skills, but he's not a star player. We know the linebackers. It's not even worth going over what he's got there. And then at corner, particularly outside corner, it's pretty evident he doesn't trust anybody outside Darius Slay and Steve Nelson. And, the Eagles have been kind of lucky because how many cornerbacks get tweaks. They might not even be serious injuries, but it might be a hamstring. It might be an ankle. It might be something that keeps him out for a game or two. I kind of like to see that, to see who we throw out there and what he do, because it's pretty clear he does not have confidence in any of his backup corners. And, if you think about it, well, they brought in Mac McCain. They've traded for Tay Gallen. They keep bringing in these young corners from outside the organization, darts at the dartboard, hoping somebody hits, and so hoping somebody gives them what they can. I would, Andre Chachere, I always got to cast myself. He's more of a special teams guy. But they keep rolling in corners trying to find some depth. And that's when I talked about trading Steve Nelson. There's so many injuries to corners around the league. That's why you might have some value in Steve Nelson. But if you trade Steve Nelson, who are you going to play? So it's kind of a conundrum.
Actually, as I told you yesterday, John, I think there's a better chance they could actually trade Maddox, which I know you believe they want to re-sign Maddox, and I would understand why. I tell you they could re-sign Maddox after the fact, but you said that doesn't happen in the NFL. We'll see. Here's the point I want to make with you, John. I think it's my Birds 365 most time co-host who continues to tell me Dallas Goedert is going to get paid, and he's going to get paid big, and he might be the highest paid tight end in the NFL because he does it all. He can catch the ball, but he can also be a great inline blocker when need be. And while I buy that theory, is it even necessary here in Philadelphia since they don't run the football? Do you want to pay Dallas Goedert the highest tight end money in the NFL and then not have him use one of his strengths, which is run blocking? Again, I'm back to where I started. My first question with you, is this a run Miles run weekend? Will we actually see the Eagles tap in to, just from the tight end perspective, one of Dallas Goedert's strengths, since he's now the man here with no Zach Ertz to complement?
Yeah, it's a fair point. And again, everything goes back to the offense and the offensive scheme and what you're doing to this offense by limiting the offense. And you're right. Why pay a tight end $14 million if you're not going to use that tight end? I would say not only the blocking aspect, but also throwing the football, what we were talking about before, in the middle of the field. That's the tight end's job.
Yep.
A lot of the time. It doesn't make sense. But I think we all know this offense has to change next year, whether it's with a new quarterback or whether with the same quarterback. It's got to change. It's got to shift. There's got to be more balance. There's got to be more using every single yard on the field, not just certain parts of the field. I think Howie Roseman understands that. So I think he's operating, when you talk about in the extension that Dallas will ultimately get, he's operating with that sentiment. But if the coach doesn't change, I mean, the coach is gone. If the coach doesn't change, if this offense doesn't start evolving, like, he can lean on the crutch and say, I couldn't do it because of the quarterback, and you move on to the next quarterback, and he'll have that opportunity. It's not going to be a one and done guy. But if it continues in the same way, he's going to be 2 and out. No question about that. I mean, it has to change. It has to change.
Yeah, John, you kind of led into my next question here. It's even the guys I talked to this weekend, they don't think, that whole 6 games Nick Sirianni thing, where he'll be fired or not, that just seems asinine at this point. It seems like the Eagles are willing to give him at least 2 years, but I guess 3 years is a good indicator where a guy can coach or not.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly not 6 games. And 6 games where, by the way, you were supposed to lose the 4 games you lost. I mean, I think if everybody goes back to their preseason predictions, they said, oh, they lost to San Francisco, they lost at Dallas, they lost to Kansas City, they lost to Tampa Bay. It's not exactly a pearl clutching moment. I mean, these losses were kind of expected. I think the issues come in with the context of how those losses unraveled as they went on, and looking at the offense. I think that's what you're saying. This guy's an offensive head coach. This guy was brought in to be a play caller. This guy's supposed to be the young up and coming ahead of the schemes offensively. He can scheme people open. He can do this with wide receivers. Well, we haven't seen that. And again, it goes back to my overriding point. People are probably tired of listening to it. Is that because he's protecting the quarterback, or is that because he's not capable of doing the things he was sold as? You better hope it's the first.
He better hope. The Eagles better hope. Eagles fans better hope. Last one, JM. Is it just a foregone conclusion that Lane Johnson is going to be plugged and played right back at right tackle this week? I know that he put on social media he's rejoining the team and thanked all the people for understanding and the like. And we know how good a player he is, but he did miss a couple of weeks. Is it a given that he's just going to be able to step in and go right back into the starting lineup and play 100% of the snaps, because the Eagles don't rotate guys on the offensive line if they don't have to? When do you think Coach Sirianni will let that be known that, yes, Lane's good to go, and we expect him full bore?
I'm guessing he kind of begs off today and says, we'll see how he jumps in. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I think he might need a week to get back in the mix, but we'll see. I could see him putting him out there as well. Knowing Nick, he's going to play the competitive advantage card. He's going to say, well, we don't know. And then I'll go to practice and I'll know, but I won't be allowed to tell you, and that type of thing. So I could see it going both ways. I could see them, he's played a long time. If anything, 2 weeks off from a physical perspective probably helped his body, probably helped his ankle. I think he could do it. I think they'll play the competitive advantage card as the week goes on.
It's funny. Instead of where's Waldo, where's Nate Herbig? Yes, the Eagles are getting a competitive advantage because we don't know where Nate Herbig's going to show up on the Eagle offensive line. I like you.
Yeah, I'm sure Las Vegas is very concerned about that.
And I'm really looking concerned Thursday night.
Yeah, Las Vegas. Not only the Raiders, but the gambling capital of the world. That could swing the point spread by about 6 or 7 points. Where Nate Herbig.
Well, I will say, Gus Bradley, I'm sure, is losing a lot of sleep trying to figure out where Nate Herbig is going to be. But I will say, if you go back to the Carolina week, I was talking to some of the Carolina writers. They did the same thing. They were moving. Cam Irving was out, remember, their left tackle, and they were moving Jeff. Who am I missing? Their right tackle. It's their best offensive lineman. He's
not Cam. See, this is how much I paid attention to Carolina.
Yeah, I'm blanking. But anyway, they were moving him over to left tackle, and they were starting Brady Christensen, a rookie, at right tackle. And everybody in Carolina knew it, but they weren't allowed to report it because Matt Rule thought he had a competitive advantage. And I said the same thing. Oh yeah, Jonathan Gannon is concerned that Brady Christensen is going to be a right tackle. These coaches are nuts at times, but what can you do?
Right, and then you let them play their game, and you just wait to see what they actually do. Well, where is John McMullen? We know he's on the COVID test list, and he is going to go in and pass with flying colors. J-Mac, we will see you back here in the morning on Birds 365.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Johnny Mac here with us, with yours truly, Jody McDonald, and Jeff Kerr, who's done another outstanding job filling in for John McMullen. We'll come back. We still got Eagle stuff to break down. One thing we haven't really touched on yet, and I think we have to, because our society is what it is, where we are with football and with life these days. Eagles are only a 3-point underdog against the Raiders. That does surprise me a little bit. We're talking 2-4 Eagles against a 4-2 Raiders in Las Vegas, and Eagles are only a field goal underdog. I'll get Jeff Kerr's take as to why he thinks that's the case. Kerr and McDonald, your Birds 365 guys coming back next.